Hello, welcome to another podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Steve, and welcome to the Science Shed.
Yeah, it's good to be back. And Steve and I, we're doing this kind of like as disembodied people in two different places.
That's right, yeah. We're doing it via the phone, which it seems a bit weird. But it's going all right. What do you think, Nick?
Oh, it's not too bad. There's a bit of a delay on the line, but never mind. Yeah, we're going to have to do a short, apology for the quality of the podcast that you're going to listen to today, aren't we, Steve? Yeah,
that's right. We recorded this week's podcast in the Royal Society in London, and it was before Nick and I knew what we were doing, really. So it's just incredible ineptitude in terms of the recording quality. But I think you'll agree that the quality of the conversation is exemplary. What do you think, Nick?
I don't know about that, Steve, but I do blame you for any repercussions because it was your idea to book a room in the cathedral that is the Royal Society, and anyone who's been to a cathedral of science will know that they're very echoey places. It's not really a cathedral, we should say that. It's just,
maybe it's a kind of meta comment that we managed to make it really echoey in what we consider a cathedral of science. That's good, I like that.
Oh, wow, so we were kind of like, it was...
We're meta.
We did it on purpose.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's really echoey, and we're sorry. But yeah, this week the podcast we're talking about speaking a little bit about Harry Kroto, who sadly passed away a few weeks ago, and Nick's doing his favourite thing, which is mixing hard rock and science. Isn't that right, Nick?
Yeah, it's one of the things that's closest to my heart. Hard rock and how that crosses over into the land of science.
Well, good. Well, should we get on with it?
Yeah, let's go, Steve.
All right, here we go.
Science Shed! We're in the Science Shed! Science Shed! We're in the Science Shed! Come on, Steve. Bunsen. Burner. Dolly. Machine. Internal. Combustion. What do we need? Steam. Petri. Dishes. Oscar. Bay. Isaac. Newton. Transplanting. Hello, Steve. Welcome to the new Steve and Nick podcast. Yeah. How are you today, Steve?
I'm very well, thanks, Nick. How are you?
Oh, I'm not so bad. I had a nice journey up here to the Royal Society.
That's right. We're talking from inside the Royal Society, which is a bit different from talking in your living room.
It's a little bit more grand.
It's episode 2 of the podcast. I thought we'd push the boat out.
You really have, Steve. You've invited me up here, and by your kind invitation, I have been inducted into this Hall of Legends.
Hall of Legends. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame of scientists.
I haven't seen Mick Jagger today, though.
No, he's not a scientist. No.
Oh, no, he's not, is he? I forgot. But he's a rock and roller.
He is.
Anyway, it's...
like Feynman. He was a bit of a rock and roller.
He was. He played the drums, didn't he? But anyway, it's nice to be here. It's quite posh when you come in because it's on Pall Mall and, it's a big ground, sort of old building, Edwardian or something, I don't really know. It's beautiful, big marbled hall, and then you come upstairs, and then it's just a bunch of normal people in an open plan office.
That's right, yeah. The illusion.
Yeah, they're all totally normal.
Sort of behind the curtain.
They're just minding their own business, getting on with work, all sitting around computers like any other office.
Having cups of tea.
I can't believe that it's the same place that Isaac Newton had an apple land on his head.
None of that's true.
That happened here though, didn't it?
No, it didn't.
I'm sure it did. And didn't he have a punch-up with Robert Hooke downstairs?
No, it wasn't in this building, I told you.
They had some kind of cat fight.
I'm sure they had a cat fight, but didn't happen in this building. They've only been here since after the Second World War. But it's a beautiful building.
Oh, you've just destroyed all my legends.
Sorry.
I thought I was walking...
I think this is actually the 3rd building that the Royal Society's been in.
Do you know where they were before?
No, we really should look this up. We should practice before we show off. Yeah. Anyway, we're in the Royal Society, which is fantastic.
I feel really excited about it. It's cool. Downstairs they had a massive mace.
They do, yeah.
You occasionally come here. Do you get the mace out?
There's very little. Yeah, we use the mace for any occasion.
You do like reverent stuff with it?
Yeah, we kind of pretend to knight people, that kind of thing.
Is it like in the Masons?
It does feel a little bit like we're in the Masons, doesn't it?
Well, not up here because everyone's like in an office. I just bumped into a colleague that I haven't seen for 13 years. I used to work with in an editorial company.
Yeah,
and I know for a fact he's a normal bloke.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing dodgy about him.
So maybe they don't let the fellows up into this bit.
I think the fellows are in a special room somewhere.
Right.
Probably like beating each other with strange sticks.
Yeah, which have a Latin
Is this where Opus Dei from as well?
No, like we're not in that older building.
Oh my god! I swear that there's.
But they do have. So for anyone that doesn't know, the Royal Society was the first place to publish a scientific journal called the Royal Transactions of the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, which was the first ever scientific journal. They have every copy.
Is it called that because they sort of ponder, they're sort of quite philosophical about things? Like,
so you can go back, but it's great. You can go back.
I didn't know about where the sun was coming from. And I feel very philosophical about it.
Well, it's great. What you can do is you can go there and you can look back between 350 years and you can just pull an article out and read it. And I did that the other day, and I opened it up, and the article's entitled "Optimal Hunting Strategies for Partridge."
Well, that's a good argument for not pulling out animals.
Isn't it fun?
Well, it's quite good fun, I suppose. It's better than the boring articles that we probably normally read. Isn't
Exactly.
It? You know, Steve, that I work a bit in the area of nanotechnology.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I do work in nanotechnology. It's a very exciting field. So nanotechnology is small stuff, isn't it? How small, Steve?
Small is a small thing. Why don't we define what nanotechnology is rather in a slightly more scientific way than small stuff?
Do we have to, Steve?
Yeah, I think so.
You always bring me back down to earth.
I'm good cop and you're bad cop. That's how this is going to work.
Or maybe the other way around. Maybe you're bad cop, I'm good cop.
Okay, well, nanotechnology, for anyone that doesn't know, is essentially the study of things that occur on the nanoscale. So a nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter.
Is it a nanometer or a nanometer?
I would call it a nanometer.
Why?
Well, is it a kilometre or a kilometre?
I don't know. Kilometre, some people say kilometre.
No one says kilometre.
Kilometre. They do. They say kilometre.
I have never heard someone say kilometre.
They say kilometre and kilometre.
Yeah, that's true.
So they do. Kilometre, that's what I was thinking of.
Right.
I got confused with the whole kilometre. But never mind. Anyway, yeah, so you're saying it's small stuff?
It's small stuff. I think so. Anything that generally is considered, it's on like kind of 3 orders of magnitude around that. So going from one nanometer up to 1 micron, I think typically is how people choose to define nanotechnology. But that's how I define it. So how would you define it?
Well, I've heard it. So so a millimeter is small. People understand a millimeter is small. Mm-hmm. So a micrometer is 1,000th of a millimeter. Mm-hmm. So and the nanoscale, I would say, starts at about 100th of a micrometer. So
just to give everyone a feel of it. So a hair is about 50 microns, something like that. It's about 100 microns.
It's about 1,000th the width of a hair. It's stuff below that, I think people genuinely class as being on the nanoscale. Anyway, so in my lab, we look at nanotechnology a bit for drug delivery. Mm-hmm. Right, so it's quite interesting. So we're doing a bunch of stuff to do with trying to deliver stuff to injury sites when they break a bone or something. But I came across this paper, Steve, and I want to tell you about it.
Should we call this segment, I came across this paper, Steve? I like it.
We could do.
Okay, so you came across this paper, Nick.
Yeah, so the paper, right, and I was alerted to it. I've got a friend in Australia. He's not a scientist, he's just a punter. He's just got a job, he lives in Sydney, has a good life, has a suntan.
It's a bit derogatory to everyone that isn't a scientist, though.
Well, I can't remember what I said now.
Punter.
I blacked it out. Well, punter's fine. I don't mind being called punter.
Fine.
He just hangs around in Sydney. He's got a normal sort of job.
Uh-huh.
He wears shorts probably too much, like most Australians generally do. That's a defining characteristic to Australia. But anyway, he found this paper, and I think it was reported in the the news outlets in Australia. I don't think it's been reported much in the UK, but it's by an Australian group. That may be part of the reason.
Okay.
I just want to read out. I'm just going to read out the title of the paper to start with.
Okay.
So it's called.
So this is a research article.
This is a research article.
It's been published in a peer-reviewed journal.
It's a good journal as well.
Okay, let's not. Okay, well.
I don't want to go into the details of what makes a good journal. It's called ACS. That's the American Chemical Society. Applied Materials and Interfaces. And the paper is called "Thunderstruck" in inverted commas : plasma polymer-coated porous silicon microparticles as a controlled drug delivery system. All right, so what they're doing is they're making tiny particles and they're using them to deliver drugs. So they kind of release drugs quite slowly, kind of like a pill, but in the bloodstream rather than in the guts, right? Anyway, the paper seems pretty normal. There's lots of kind of quite boring stuff that you'd normally find in a paper, you know. It says things like silicon microparticles were placed into an Eppendorf tube to which a known volume, 50 microlitres to 200 microlitres of the model drug solution of approximately 5 mg per mil, CPT, in dry distilled DMF, was added. And it goes on like that for quite a long time.
So for those that don't know, that's very common. That's a very
sort of
science parlance.
This is the sort of rubbish I write on a daily basis.
Indeed, complete
it's
science guff.
Tedious but boring. Anyway, it carries on in this vein for some time. And then it says, there's a sentence here. After the pressure was adjusted to 200 millitorr, the acoustic drive signal was turned on by playing AC/DC's song Thunderstruck on a loop. The volume was slowly increased until the particles were visibly bouncing.
Wow. Okay. So did they do controlled experiments with other AC/DC tunes, or maybe other?
This is my main criticism. If I were reviewing the paper, yeah,
you'd be like, why did you not do Back in Black?
And it goes on like that. There's basically like it's just like protein. They were introduced into a plasma reactor on a loudspeaker, and after applying vacuum, an acoustic drive signal was turned on by playing AC/DC song Thunderstruck. So it goes on like this a lot. Thunderstruck. So no other AC/DC tune. It's in the acknowledgement. The authors would like to acknowledge the use of the song Thunderstruck by AC/DC.
Wow.
So generally, what they were trying to do was coat these kind of like microparticles in another type of molecule. And they thought that it says, what does it say? These are obtained, so for this, music can be used. A song that produces chaotic motion and excellent Teflon-like overcoatings on the particles was Thunderstruck by AC/DC.
So, but that does suggest that they've tried other songs. I read the subtext of that is that other songs don't work as well. If you tried, the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, then it's bullshit. It doesn't work at all.
Well, possibly. I mean, they needed something. Apparently, they needed something chaotic.
Well, but what about the Who?
Who?
The Who.
Who?
The Who.
Let's not go down that avenue. Sorry, Steve. Yeah. So I thought that was quite an interesting paper.
Wow. Okay, I've never seen that before in a science paper. It's good to see that kind of mixture of science and art.
You know what? I think it's a bit silly.
You think it's a bit silly?
It's a bit silly.
Are you jealous that you have never worked at ACD? That, to me, actually, that sounds like a bet in the pub. They're saying, I bet you I can work into a serious scientific peer-reviewed article the use of AC/DC's Thunderstruck.
I totally agree. I looked at the dude afterwards. The main author's a guy called Nico Volkler, I think his name's pronounced. And he's a pretty well-respected scientist. He's got like more than 200 publications.
Wow.
He does like loads of different stuff, spin out things, stuff to do with tech transfer, trying to make businesses. And I don't know, he's just decided to publish this paper that has AC/DC in it.
That's incredible. So now we've got to make ourselves a similar bet. Science is fraught with these kind of these bets through history.
Come on in, Steve.
Well, I think as a huge fan of the Canadian rock band Rushnik, that's yourself, not me. I think we'd have to try and work in a Rush tune, or at least an acronym based on a Rush album. So Nick and I are writing a paper at the moment together, and maybe we should get like 2112 in somewhere. We should acknowledge
2112 you could do, because it could be like, I don't know, some spurious catalogue number for something.
Exactly, but no one would know it.
Exactly. So you find out in the Sigma catalogue.
No, but we'll leave a little clue, a little breadcrumb. What we'll do is we'll acknowledge the corresponding author of this article, just in the acknowledgement, and see if they notice. Maybe something a little bit.
Acknowledge who? What?
This guy.
Why would we acknowledge him?
Because he thought up the idea. It's like putting classic rock tunes in
we acknowledge
research articles.
There are some other. There are other examples of this type of paper, aren't there? But usually they are kind of jokes. We were talking last week about the whole people using like a unit with a stupid name.
Yeah, the Pirate Ninja, famously from the film The Martian.
Which I think is stupid. did my head in.
You didn't like the pirate?
No, we talked about it last week.
Oh, no.
But I mean, this is kind of stupid as well. But I kind of had more respect for it just because it's just totally nuts, and it probably is in a scientific publication. I can't believe that they did it really.
Wow. Well, I'm going to have to try and outdo you next week then. I found this.
Well, you can try, Steve.
All right, it's going to be. You set the bar high.
Struggle to beat.
It's really high. Okay, that's great.
I've actually been in a lab this week.
You've done some experiments.
There's a guy who I work with now, and he makes bubbles.
Bubbles.
Small bubbles. Tiny little nano bubbles. Micro bubbles and nano bubbles. And like these bubbles, they've been used for quite a long time for like trying to image in tissues, ultrasound imaging. Mm-hmm. So the idea is they're a contrast agent. Mm-hmm. So basically, and it sounds dangerous because I know about diving and bubbles in the blood are bad, right? Mm-hmm. Do you get the bends if you get bubbles in the blood? Right, well, this happens normally. You inject bubbles into someone's bloodstream, right? And then when they go in an organ, you can see them. So it allows you to get some better contrast.
And what's the origin of the contrast?
I don't know. I'm not a bubble expert.
Okay.
I'm just a biologist.
Okay.
He tells me that that's what happens, and I just believe him.
That's what
Isn't that how it works? Anyway,
blindly believing others.
No, but I've seen scientific publications and things, so it must be true.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely must be
I'm
true.
not saying it's true. I was asking how it worked.
Anyway, so we were in the lab. And I'm not going to explain why we're doing it yet. But basically, I was in the lab with him, and it's weird being back in it because I don't go in the lab very much these days. You probably still go in the lab.
I rarely go in the lab.
Do you really?
Very, very rarely.
That's sad.
It is sad. So
you're a proper lab monkey.
I love being in the lab.
I'm bored a bit. I don't want to be in the lab.
I like being in the lab.
I want to be sitting at my desk drinking a cup of tea and just cruising through the BBC website.
Right, it's just wasting time, wasting taxpayers' money.
Yeah,
that's what
students do all the work.
Exactly, and you get all the credit.
Often.
Pretty much. So they write the papers.
Yeah.
They do all the work. Yeah, they make the figures.
We're joking, of course. But sitting at the desk drinking tea. But anyway, I went to the lab with him. He's a super enthusiastic guy, and we made some bubbles. And I thought it would be, quite a technically challenging, interesting thing to make bubbles. Do you think it is, Steve?
You just shake. You just shake. That's how you do it.
You get some. I'm making it a little, dumbing it down a bit, right? But basically, you get some soap.
Yeah.
Or something
you
like
give it a shake.
You put it in a bit of water.
You put it in a bit of water, pushing back the boundaries.
And you do shake it, but you do shake it in a little bit of a more scientific way. You have a machine called a sonicator, which actually delivers high frequency vibrations, and it basically bubbles it up into a froth.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Job done. Bubbles made.
Cool. It's very cool. And then you have to use a centrifuge to get the little ones and the big ones separated.
Right.
But he was...
You just do it by mass and centrifuge. Is that how you separate them?
Yes, they go to the top, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, actually, some of them go to the top, some of them go to the bottom. But, it was quite fun being back in the lab. And I'd forgotten how... Because when I was in the lab, I was quite careful and I try and do everything properly. He was just totally freestyling. He was just
bucket science.
He was, we didn't have anything to hand. It was always like, what do we? Had to go and get bits of plastic to prop things up randomly. Right. And found lying in the lab.
Very unscientific. So I think most people, if they listen, if they're not a scientist themselves, they imagine scientists being very methodical, very fastidious, sliding everything up, organised, and you're saying that's the exact opposite.
It's not like that at all. No. I mean, he was improvising. I mean, you do improvise to a certain extent, but he was just doing it randomly on. Another thing he was doing was he had these syringes, and he wanted to do something with the syringe. I won't go into the details anyway. But to do that, he had to try and cut the syringe in half. Right?
So a plastic syringe.
It's a plastic syringe,
it's
not like a tiny little one you'd have a vaccination. It's quite a big chunky syringe.
Yeah.
So he had to try and cut the syringe in half, including the plunger, right? But we didn't have any proper scissors knocking around. So we went through 3 or 4 pairs of scissors, just kind of blindly crushing the syringe. Like, eventually it kind of just snapped into like loads of fragments.
Right, but did it work in the end?
Yeah, but it was just by random luck that one of them just didn't shatter in the wrong place.
So if you cut enough syringes in half, eventually you find one that works.
Yeah, pretty much. But anyway, I mean, it was fun.
Yeah, fun being in the lab.
It's fun being in the lab, and the thing that's nice about being in the lab as well, like all the students are in there, and you can have a bit of banter with people in the lab. And when you're sitting in the office having a cup of tea, looking at the BBC website, pop bitch, that sort of thing, you can't have as much banter because generally people in the office, they're doing worky type things.
Right.
They're not just hanging around waiting for something.
You can actually chat to them, or as
a little chinwag.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an important point there. I think what's interesting, like what makes a good experimentalist, I think, is that ability to improvise and chop things in half and take things apart and use them in a different way. Because actually, that's how the majority of science, I think, gets done. Is people not just getting on with it and improvising. Well,
yeah, and my girlfriend. I say my girlfriend. Maybe I should call her a partner, but when I say partner, people get a bit confused over.
I thought you were gay.
But that's pretty much the story.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm never sure, but we've been together like 10 years. Anyway, what am I talking about? Anyway, she's an artist. Right? So she's an artist. So she thinks that like I'm a boring man with no creative ability.
Right.
What do you say to people like that, Steve?
Well, you should invite her into the laboratory and show how creative you are.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So... Well, I don't have to invite him to the laboratory to do that, Steve.
Well, I just... you know what I mean.
Anyway, so...
yeah.
So do you think scientists are creative, Steve?
Do I think they're creative?
Back to serious mode.
I think there are elements of science that are hugely creative. I mean, at some level, we're solving problems. And although you're not necessarily creating a song or painting a picture, what you are doing is thinking of kind of creative and innovative ways to solve problems. So, yeah, I mean, for instance, in our lab, we're constantly thinking of new instrumentations. How can we use new technology? How, for instance, we have a 3D printer in the lab, which predominantly we use to print out little hedgehogs, but we've actually used scientifically for many things. We also
what hedgehogs?
Just like little totems, because when you kind of calibrate it all, you kind of just print out some of the things you can download.
Why a hedgehog?
Oh, why not a hedgehog?
Why not? I don't know. Why not? I don't know. Yoda.
You could do Yoda too. That would be fine. I tell you what, next time I'll print you out a Yoda. How about that?
That's great. Yeah.
But we have we're playing around with things like virtual reality. We've got a DK2.
What sorts of virtual reality you do?
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know. Virtual reality is quite advanced these days.
Yeah, indeed. So we've got the developer kit too.
Can you touch and feel things with virtual reality?
Can't touch at the moment. I'm still
really? When you can, let me know.
What I'm trying to do is attach it to my microscope. So we have lots of four-dimensional data, and four-dimensional data is very difficult to convey through a scientific publication on a figure.
So four-dimensional data just means stuff that happens in time.
Yeah. But it's not always time, it could be something else.
What's five-dimensional data?
Well, it would be another orthogonal dimension that changes, that doesn't affect the others.
What, like what?
You could do...
Is that like in, time travel?
No.
Because I see this four-dimensional and five-dimensional stuff sometimes in papers, and I just think, why are they calling it that? That just means that...
No, it just means...
It's like a video of a man walking through a room is four-dimensional data.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But then... Yeah, well, I don't get your point. So all dimensionality...
I just think it's like a bit of a buzzword. People use five-dimensional, four-dimensional to make it sound more complex than it actually is.
That's all science is, really, isn't it?
No, it tries to make things more simple.
I think
there's a good quote by Paul Dirac about that, and I can't remember the quote, so I'm going to paraphrase it. But he said, poetry makes simple things more complicated, whereas science makes complicated things more simple.
Yeah, I know off the quote.
Yeah, I get a bit...
You just read out a whole paragraph from that research article, and it didn't sound simple to me. So philosophically, I agree with you. In actuality, I don't think it ends up being that way.
So you're talking about the research paper about thunderstruck that we talked about earlier on.
Exactly. So they are reading out quite verbose and
extensive language when it doesn't really need to be, right? What they did was dissolve something in something else.
Oh yeah, I suppose so. But the point of that is, it's like a recipe book, so you wouldn't want an ambiguous recipe book, would you? You'd want to know exactly what you're doing. I'm a terrible cook, but I can follow a recipe, right? So because I don't have no intuition when it comes to cooking at all, it's rubbish. But if I get a good cookbook, I'm an amazing cook.
Right.
I've got this Jaffrey cookbook.
So you're saying if people were more, if chefs were more scientific, then you would be awesome. Then everyone would be awesome, is what you're saying.
I think that if you could, like, physically exactly perform a number of tasks to make, I don't know, duck à l'orange or something, I'm going back to the 1980s.
I like that, that's not
do the Wolverhampton man. But anyway, in theory, that's what you do, and that's the whole point of a scientific publication, isn't it? I mean, you have to reproduce what someone else has done to make something happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, science is no different from cooking.
Science is no different. Have you read Harold McGee's book on food and cooking? It's really very interesting.
Is he like... because Heston Blumenthal's famous for sciencey cooking, isn't he?
He is, yeah. But Heston has no background in science.
Oh, this dude does he?
He's a physicist. And he was frustrated with exactly what you're suggesting, Nick, is that people use all these words in cooking that don't necessarily... So, for instance, the word acidulated is used. Acidulated. So
what does that mean?
It means acid. It means
acid. I get irritated with very minor things.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get onto that. But so he wrote a whole book actually kind of detailing. There's no recipes in it. All it is just about food. So, for instance, there's a whole chapter on eggs, and it starts with the evolution of the chicken. It says how the chicken came about. That's the kind of level of detail that he goes into.
You don't bloody need to know about the evolution of the chicken to boil an egg.
But no one's ever done this before. You do need to know about protein aggregation, right? You do need to know about denaturation. Protein.
You do not, Steve. To boil an egg, you just need to know how long you put the egg in some boiling water.
No, but no one had ever bothered to actually try and understand how to make the perfect poached egg. No one had ever bothered to understand what, when people say about kneading dough to kind of release the gluten.
Oh yeah.
It's like all these things which people kind of talk about, right? And
it's kind of food quackery.
Food quackery, exactly. And so he kind of debunked a lot of food quackery. It's an excellent book, I reckon.
Oh, okay. What's it called again?
It's called On Food and Cooking by Harold McGee.
Have you got a copy?
I have.
I'll borrow it next time.
You will do.
I'm excited about that.
It would be good, won't it? In fact, Heston's quoted on the back saying this is the only cookbook you ever need. That's what he said.
Well, bully for Heston.
Bully for Heston. So Nick, Harry Kroto died.
That's sad.
That's really sad. So for anyone that doesn't know, Harry Kroto was the Nobel laureate in 1996, I believe, for the discovery of C60, which is a unique form of carbon. He's also a big science communicator, and I was lucky enough to be taught by him and interact with him when I was an undergraduate.
That's cool. So is that buckyballs?
Yeah, so what I thought we'd do is he was a really great science communicator, so I thought I would kind of tell the story a little bit about what buckyballs are and how we discovered them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's do it.
Okay. So Harry was, he was a an astrophysical chemist. So he was kind of looking at, using radio telescopes to look at vibrational bands to try and detect molecules in space. So when people think, when Brian Cox, I know how much you love Brian Cox, Nick.
I'm warming to Brian Cox.
Interesting.
I haven't seen him as much recently. I think that's the reason.
Right. So when people talk about, we say that there's atmosphere of carbon dioxide, or there's rain made of methane, or all these kind of things. The way we learn about that is by looking at the light that comes from those planets, the reflected light that comes from those planets, or through the interstellar medium or places like that. And these are initially discovered by Fraunhofer, right? So these are the bits of the spectrum that are missing, and they're missing because certain atoms and molecules are absorbing that light.
I believe that's how they discovered helium, and also why it was called a helium, because of its absorption bands coming from the sun.
Exactly right, Helios.
Wow, I'm really interesting when I...
You really are.
You
really are.
Wow.
And also your voice gets a little bit nerdier when you say that.
Oh, well, I do. I kind of put on the voice. Well, and it's quite interesting because it was... I I believe, one of the first elements to be discovered when it hadn't actually been isolated. Just evidence of it.
That's good, isn't it? I like that. Anyway, what you do is you take the light from something in space and you disperse it through a prism, and then you look at that on some kind of detector and you see kind of black lines in it.
Why are you telling me all this?
Well, because I'm going to say how Harry discovered C60.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just explaining how spectroscopy works.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So that branch of science is called spectroscopy, and Harry Kroto was working. He was interested in long chain alkyne molecules, which are basically chains of carbon, and he wanted to see if they formed in space. So what they do is, just in the same way you take the light from the sun and disperse it, he was looking at a different region of the spectrum, in the radio wave and the microwave region of the spectrum, and points the telescope at various planets and things. And what he was doing is making these compounds in his laboratory, and then to discover exactly where these absorption lines are, these little black lines are, and then looking for those lines in space. And then the idea would be that if you see them, that's because that molecule is actually there in that interstellar cloud, or in that planet, or not planet in that time, but in that, from that star.
So what did he find then?
So he was looking for those things, and the way they do these, the way they make these molecules is they take two bits of carbon, essentially two graphite rods, and they put a huge current across them, and they just kind of wheel them into each other, and they all just like vaporize, basically. And in doing so, they make a lot of soot, but they also can isolate some compounds from that. And one of them, happened to be what they were doing is looking at the peaks for these small carbon chains. And they were looking at, one molecule that contained 2 carbon chains, and then 3 carbon chains, and then 4. And they got all the way up to 60, and there was this huge peak in the spectrum. And they were like, well, this is weird. And actually there's this, famous recording in his book, where it's like circles C60, what's this? And then there was another peak at C70. So there was this really interesting thing where they wondered what was this? What was this structure? And what's really interesting, so carbon's obviously a very important molecule, and it has 3, what we now know as 3 what are called allotropes, or enantiomorphs, old chemists call them, but they're 3 basic forms of carbon.
So this would be like diamond, graphite.
So diamond and graphite are the 2 that most people know, and so there's no difference chemically between carbon and sort of graphite and diamond. It's just the way that the atoms are arranged.
Yeah.
Isn't that quite? I mean, it's quite amazing in and of itself. I mean, think how different those two.
Are there any other things like that then?
Absolutely, yeah. So tin famously has 2 enantiomorphs, one of which is toxic.
Oh, really?
Which is allegedly why Napoleon didn't do too well and went into on the Russians.
Oh, really?
Yeah, poisoned.
He was poisoned. Whose troops were
by
poisoned?
the enantiomorph of.
I thought they just all starved.
But they did, because all of their food went bad.
Oh, right. I see what you mean.
Yeah. Anyway, so there was lots of different versions of it. But what Harry did is, in these experiments where he had no interest in caring about graphite and carbon, is he found that there's a third form of carbon, which is a very unique thing, very unusual. I mean, carbon and graphite have been known for thousands of years, and to kind of just happen upon a completely new form.
So that's the big golf ball one then?
Yeah, so it looks like a football. Yeah, so it's called, and it's named after the geodesic domes made by Buckminster Fuller. And Harry was a huge...
It's a shame he had such a long name, isn't it?
Buckminster. So initially it was called Buckminster Fullerene.
It was called like Gav.
Dave.
You could call it, you'd call it the new form of carbon. Gavine.
Gav.
Gavine would have been good, because it sounds a bit like graphene.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, I was just got distracted then because I was thinking, it's graphene, isn't it? But graphene is just one layer of graphite, isn't it? That's
right, but it's the same structure as graphite is. So he found, and the way he found it, this is what's quite cool. So they were trying to isolate it, right? So they're trying to put them in various instruments, things like an NMR spectrometer or a mass spectrometer. They were trying to kind of isolate it, and one of the things about graphite is it doesn't dissolve in any solvent, right? So if you get a bit of pencil lead on your carpet, there's nothing you can do. You can only brush it off. You can't dissolve it in the same way.
Oh, really?
No, it just doesn't dissolve in anything.
But it brushes off pretty well.
It brushes off pretty well. But
get the vacuum cleaner on it.
You can do that.
It's like coal, isn't it? You can just put the vacuum cleaner on.
But you can't dissolve it, right? That's the point. But C60 you can. So you take this is how they purified it. So the the PhD student in this group, a guy called Jonathan Hare, who you might remember did a BBC series called Rough Science, where they were kind of marooned on an island and they had to kind of get, it's kind of in the early 2000s.
Never heard about it.
Okay, anyway, Kate Humble was in it. Yeah. So this actually dissolves in toluene, which is an organic solvent, and actually makes this beautiful purple kind of colour. So basically you just make some soot and you pour some toluene on it and you purify out carbon C60.
Oh, so soot has it has buckyballs in it?
Got loads of it in it.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Is it of any use to anybody?
So it spawned an entire area of research. So things like nanotubes, if anyone's heard of that, and actually and people would argue nanotechnology. This was all in the mid-80s, so 85 this discovery happened.
I mean, like carbon nanotubes are not, but it's fullerene.
No, they're exactly the same.
Are they really?
Yeah. So if you imagine taking a football and popping it in half and just dragging it out and then putting a thin sheet.
Is that what a carbon nanotube?
That's all a carbon nanotube.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So it's like the caps are the important bits, and then it's kind of like bent graphite.
Yeah, so all of the discoveries with carbon nanotubes came from the original discovery of C60.
Oh, right. Well, there you go. I had no idea about that.
And so Harry, with two others, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1996. And it's really sad. I look back, I went and got he taught me as an undergraduate, he taught me molecular symmetry, which if there's any chemists out there, everyone learns molecular symmetry. It's a quite obtuse bit of chemistry.
I don't know, I've heard about it because when you as a biologist, you get different enantiomers I might be talking about something totally different. You get different enantiomers of molecules like glucose. You do. And D-glucose is the one that is made, like in plants and animals. And I assume they're not symmetric.
They are. So you're talking about chirality there.
So that's nothing to do with molecular.
It's related, but not quite the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So Harry taught me this, and I went and looked at my old notes from an undergraduate. So I know exactly. So it was the 3rd of May 2003 was the first time I met Harry, and it's like, as an undergrad, he's quite intimidating. He's got this kind of crazy hair, always wore the same shirt. It was either orange or green, but it was always the same.
Yeah.
I knew the guy for 15 years. He never wore anything else. And he came in and was just brilliant. It was just a fantastic opportunity. Everyone loved him. I wrote, at the end of my first lecture, "We love you, Harry." It's from 2003. And it's just a real shame that he worked at Sussex his whole life, which is where I did, the University of Sussex, where I did my undergraduate degree. And then he moved in 2004, I think, to Florida before moving back. And it's a shame. He a real loss to science, a real big communicator, and it's a shame to see him go.
Steve, do you know what's been really annoying me this week?
I don't know. Nick, what has been really annoying you this week?
Tim Peake.
Tim Peake? The astronaut?
He's annoying me.
Why is he annoying you?
Because what's he doing in space apart from doing rubbish public engagement exercises?
Dicking around, as far as I can tell.
That's what he's doing. So from what I can work out over the past couple of weeks, what he's done is he's driven a remote control car from space.
Right.
And he's
also
takes bloody pictures every day.
Pictures off.
He takes a picture. I was looking at one of the Isle of Wight just today because he grew up somewhere near there. Anyway, I like the pictures. So I've got nothing against the pictures.
Okay.
Pictures are not what's bothering me. It's things like he's driving the remote control car and then he's running a marathon.
What do you mean? He's running a marathon?
He ran the London Marathon
on a treadmill. That does seem a waste of time.
He did it quite fast actually.
Did he? What was his time?
3.5 hours.
It's pretty good.
But then again, he is weightless.
That is true. Yeah, it helps.
Yeah. He was tied down to it. But the thing about Tim Peake is, and maybe I'm kind of like obliterating my own point of criticism by the fact I'm talking about it now. But I don't actually know what he's doing. What's the point? For me, all he seems to be doing is doing like a massive kids bloody public engagement.
I saw he's been launching satellites into space. That's one of the things he's been doing.
What, with his bare hands?
Yeah, they basically just pop out the port.
They just pop out. Just
yeah.
They just open the door and just out you go.
Exactly. Well, it's actually think about it, right? So it's orbital mechanics. So that if something's heavier, it'll just occupy a different orbit. So they don't crash. It doesn't like crash into the space station. It occupies a lower orbit because of its mass and its interaction with gravity.
Oh.
So you just pop it out, Nick.
But no, I don't know. That's not true because free fall doesn't. You think about it.
Yeah.
The rate at which something falls doesn't depend on how heavy something is.
No, but it's not. It's not because of the resistance to air resistance. It's just because of the pull of gravity.
Oh.
You know, G, M1, M2.
I don't know. Well, you're more of an expert on that than me, but I thought that something of the same, it doesn't matter about the mass, it would just occupy the same orbit. But anyway, so he's popping out satellites.
Just popping them out.
Yeah, but what? I don't. How many's he got up there then?
So it feels
how long can he spend it? Are they like the size of an apple?
Like
I know you can have really small satellites.
I don't know how big they are, but he's weightless, as you said, so you can just I don't know, it's interesting, isn't it? They can just pop them out there.
It's not that interesting though. I don't know anything about. Well, this is my point of criticism. Right? He's doing all of these kind of public engagement things. That's fine. He runs a marathon.
Yeah.
He teaches. He taught a class from space. That's pretty cool. But what's he actually doing?
So Tim Peake's background isn't. So it's quite interesting. So
he's an army man. Yeah.
Exactly. So when the ESA, the European Space Agency, opened up applications for astronauts back in 2008, I think. And the first time they've done it since the early 90s. I know because I applied.
Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah,
right.
And there were two...
You're too fat to be an astronaut.
Too fat to be an astronaut.
Although you have lost some weight recently.
Thanks, Dick. There was two... there was two...
and are you too old now as well? I don't think you are, because he's quite old.
No.
Are you going to apply again then?
No. Well, you can't. It's not every year. They open it once every 15 years.
Sorry, anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, so there's two ways of entering. One is via the military route, so you're good at flying aeroplanes, and the other one's via the scientific route, because you have to go up and do science in space. And obviously Tim applied via the military route. So actually, once he's up there, not much for him to do really. Just have a little potter. You quite like it.
Why is he up there then?
Just because we want to. So they're studying. There's lots of various studies that are happening on the International Space Station.
You don't know either what he's doing.
No. So they are doing long-term studies for things like for a manned mission to Mars and things. They want to see like how the human body does in space.
Yeah. But they've been doing that for years.
Yeah, sure. But we need to garner more information, don't we? Yeah. Because it will take a few years to pop out to Mars. It's a long old way.
It's a long way. Yeah. But I mean, it's just like you hear him on the news all the time, and I'm just like, what's he doing? He's driving a remote control car. Did he really have to go to space to do that?
Yeah, did he have to ride an explosion?
Did he have to go to space? Couldn't he? Because they did it. They had the remote control car in some boring place, I don't know, Luton or something like that, and they had it driving around a hangar.
Right.
And it was kind of like he was controlling it from space. Why couldn't he have just gone to
I
don't know. Yeah, he could have gone to, I don't know, Birmingham.
Right.
And just controlled it from Birmingham.
Or Washington.
Yeah, and if they're bothered about the weightless thing, they could have just made it awkward for him. Like tickled him or made him like do something else at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Like talk to his children or something. Or,
yeah.
Get hassled by his kids, something like that. And that would have had the same effect.
It would have been a lot cheaper if Tim Peake just got hassled by his children while he tried to drive a remote control car.
Yeah, and I reckon that would be a good simulation of him like having a stressful situation whilst trying to drive like a Mars rover.
And all of that spare cash we could spend in our laboratories, couldn't we? All that billions that we spent.
Yeah, there you go. Tim Peake, that's my name.
ScienceShed! We're in the ScienceShed! Come on, Steve! Bunsen! Burner! Dolly! Machine! Internal! Combustion! What do we need? Steam! Petri! Dishes! Oscar! Bay! Isaac! Newton! Transplanting!
And that's it. That was the third episode of The Science Shed. It's Steve here. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to hear more rambles from me and Nick, please like, favourite, subscribe on social networking, all that jazz. The next episode of The Science Shed, episode 4, will be out in 2 weeks' time on a Sunday. So please look out for that. Also, if you go to my Twitter feed, which is at Steve the Chemist, you can see a picture I uploaded of the C60 molecule I was talking about in today's podcast. So that kind of beautiful purple colour I was talking about. There's a nice image of that, of Buckminster fullerene dissolved in toluene, which hopefully you'll enjoy. That's it, and we'll hopefully see you next time. Bye!